One word I would use to describe being a person of color in a white high school would be challenging.
Defenseless.
Lonely.
Confusing.
Neglected.
One word I would probably use is isolated.
Black Lives Matter protests across the world have created a wave of anti-racist fervor that took on many forms. In Poway, it took form as an Instagram account that had the goal of inciting change through sharing personal stories of discrimination in the Poway Unified School District. The Instagram account @BlackandPUSD shared previous stories of incidents where students of color, specifically Black students, are targeted inside and outside classrooms. A common thread that linked more than 500 incidents posted by the account was the theme of BIPOC students facing discrimination in predominantly white schools.
Growing up in schools that have a huge lack of diversity, it's been very, I wouldn't say challenging is the right word, but it's been very different, just because it's hard when you're growing up and you see, oh, no one else really looks like me, and it's kind of different. It makes you start to think things why do I look like this?
My experience growing up in a school that lacks diversity, it's just you're always being watched. Every action you take represents people who look like you and people who have similar skin color. And no matter where you are, you kind of stick out. Couple that with never having teachers that look like you or share your experiences, and normally being one or the only one or one of two students in a class. It's awkward. It's always the spotlight's on you.
I grew up speaking Japanese, so when I got into school, I was put into ESL, English Second Language, but I found that even up until now, the main struggle is not being able to understand, because nobody's willing to slow down, and then not being understood, and so nobody's willing to take the time to understand, which is something that's super consistent, because growing up, it was with language. Nobody was willing to slow down so that I could understand them, and nobody's willing to wait to sit down and understand what I was saying. But then later on, it was more culturally, the way people acted, I never understood, and then I wasn't understood, and also just with discipline and stuff like that. It's been very interesting for staff and students and everybody to really just not take the time to understand the differences and take the time there.
I mean, growing up with a lack of diversity, it's been my whole life. Ever since elementary school, I've been one of the few Black people at my school, on my soccer team. And I guess it didn't really matter in elementary school because kids that young kind of see past color. But in middle school, it was tough because being one of the very, very few Black people, there wasn't a lot of support.
I feel racism is a daily thing every day for me and for other people of color at school, especially at the football game, for example, the blackface.
Tonight, controversy at Poway High School after a blackout-themed spirit event took what some are calling a racist turn. It happened at last Friday night's football game.
I feel more people were angry at the fact that it was publicized than the actual incident.
Yeah, everybody knew it was there. There were photos taken while he was in the crowd. But when somebody goes to admin and shows them what happened, it was silent. Nobody heard anything about it.
When I was 15, I was standing in front of Poway High and I was speaking on the phone. She goes, well, you're speaking a different language, and it makes everybody uncomfortable. And I was like, what? She was saying all these things if you want to be speaking in America, you should be speaking English, and we don't accept whatever Chinese you're speaking. And if you want to be able to speak another language, go back to your own country. And I was standing there, I was like, this is not happening right now. And I look over 15 feet away from me is the vice principal, who's looking at me and then just turns away immediately. And I was like, oh no. And the principal walks by, nothing. And I see kids who were filming the interaction but not willing to step in. So I was standing here just covered in shock and shame and embarrassment while I was trying to defend myself, and I was fumbling over my words, and it was the first moment where I was this is not okay, this is so dehumanizing and disheartening. And it was, I think, the last moment where I actually took an experience of racism and stood up for myself and decided I wasn't gonna just internalize it and ignore it anymore like so many people had told me to do before.
It's like everyone comments on it. They always like belittle me, like call me the N-word, especially like there was like this one sub. I was the only like Black person in the room, and they kept saying the N-word over and over, and like everyone was just like I couldn't really stand up for myself because nobody really understood. So I was like the only one, you know? So nobody really had my back there, so.
Definitely a way to fix this issue. I think we just need to continue to educate students and peers about like these problems, about like microaggressions, about covert racism, because I feel like as we do like preach this at school, like these problems, but like people just aren't willing to listen. So I feel like if we just continually like tell them about it and tell stories about it, especially from like peers that they might want to listen to, that not everyone will get the message, but like a few people will get the message, and then like those few people will get it, and then the next time we do it, more people will get it, and then eventually like we'll just like plant like that seed in their mind, and hopefully like it will sprout one day and they'll realize like what they were doing was wrong and they'll change for the better. So.
Just like be nice to everyone. There's no like reason why you should hate on anyone just because of what they look like or what race they are.
I think that the main issue, like I said earlier, comes from ignorance, where we think that we're too young to learn about it and it's too sensitive a topic. But the fact that it is so sensitive is why I think it's so important to talk about it, you know, because, you know, kids will start to make racial preferences as early as 5 and 6 years old. And I think that's really the lack of exposure to diversity, especially in living in such a homogeneously white community, is where it stems from, because, you know, these kids don't understand differences, and they don't understand why kids do something a little bit differently because they look differently or they're from a different place. And so I think they immediately ridicule something that they don't understand. It's fixed with, you know, unlearning those unconscious biases that we created at such a young age, and then relearning in a way that empathizes with other people and looks to understand other people.